Welcome back to Parenting with me, Annie Plachette Murphy. Well, whether you have a toddler or a teenager, or frankly, any child who can talk, you have probably experienced the nails on the blackboard sound of whining. Sometimes we just grit our teeth and bear it, but there are better ways, including weaning kids from whining once and for all. Here to tell us how is AMY McCREADY. She is the founder of Positive Parenting Solutions. Amy, thank you so much for joining us. Again, you've been on the show before.
It's great to be back.
Let's talk about weaning from whining. First of all, you talk about their need to fulfill, your need to fulfill their need for positive attention. Really good advice. But why is this important when it comes to whining in particular?
Well, when you think about when kids whine, when they whine, we do something. We respond in some way. We either pick them up or we give them attention or we give them whatever they were whining about in the first place. But a lot of whining comes down to getting our attention.
Right.
And so if we can just proactively fill their attention basket in positive ways, that eliminates a lot of their need to whine. So I always tell parents if they can do what we call mind, body, and soul time, and that's just spending 10 minutes 1 or 2 times a day where you are one-on-one with the child, really filling their attention basket in positive ways, that will work wonders in terms of reducing a lot of that negative whining and attention-seeking behaviors that we tend to get.
Great. Well, the other thing, I think, for at least I found this with my kids, was that they really needed to be told what you meant by whining. They need to be trained to recognize that whiny voice. Would you agree that that's something that most young children, you say don't whine, and they may not actually know what you're talking about?
I do agree, and I think that's one of the really important strategies is to take time for training and talk about that whiny voice. And especially with young kids, it can be really fun to kind of role play that and practice your whiniest voice and your normal voice and say, you know, which one sounds better to you? And so once they begin to recognize what you mean by that whiny voice, then you can start to correct it.
Right, and what do you do for that? What do you tell them when you really want them to stop the whining?
Well, the first thing is to spell out the consequences. And what I mean by that is we've already talked about that whiny voice, but let them know that that whiny voice hurts your ears. And so when they whine, you're not going to respond. You're not going to pick them up. You're not even going to say any words at all. Instead, you're going to just turn around and walk away. And that way, you're kind of removing that payoff that they get from whining.
Right.
If you're not giving them any attention, all of a sudden, there's no need to do it anymore.
Yeah, of course, as you know, it's easier said than done because, I know one mom who, when the kid starts whining, she starts singing at the top of her lungs, which also, of course, has the effect of making the kids stop and kind of laugh because it's so funny to hear mom singing in the kitchen. But, the basic thing is just, you're saying you want to extinguish the negative behavior by ignoring it as much as possible.
Yes.
And then
if you think of...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Amy, I'm sorry.
I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say, as long as we're giving them enough positive attention proactively, then we can ignore that negative behavior, and that's going to be much more positive.
Right. And then, if they keep it up, what do you advise parents to do? If you had parents say to you, which I'm sure they have, because they've said to me, well, how long can you do this? My kid will whine for an hour.
Well, and that's what when you start ignoring the whining, they're used to us responding. So when we turn around and walk away with no words, they're going to think, what's going on here? So they'll probably keep it up longer and louder. So the whining will most likely get worse before it gets better. So parents really have to hold their ground. If this goes on and on and on, and eventually we give in, it just trains the kids that they just have to keep it up longer, and eventually they will get our attention and they will get their way.
Right. No, definitely. I think all of that is great advice. The only last thing I would add is be sure you don't model whining. I have to say that one of the things that I often hear with parents is, come on, then I'm looking around and I think, well, if you don't want them to whine, you better not do it yourself. Amy, this was really a worthwhile conversation. I hope all of the parents of whiners were listening. Thank you so much for joining us.